Dave, Emery, bringing you on first. How are you this fine day? And do accept my apologies for keeping you waiting.
No, not a problem at all, Sacha. I did enjoy watching everything that you showed there, and it looks a fabulous project. Thank you for inviting me here today.
Yes, we're looking forward to bringing you out here very early next year, as long as your schedule will allow. Thank you, David.
Okay.
David, Sereda, it looks cold. How are you this fine day? You'll need to unmute. You see 3 New Earth lashings again for Dave, Sereda.
All right, I can handle the lashings.
How cold is it?
Oh, I just love the cold. The snow is here a little bit. It's right around, freezing temperature. And out in the forest, getting my firewood supply for the winter, which I just love making fires. Yeah, beautiful presentation, Sacha. I mean, that's very inspiring. I mean, I've been down there, and
you came to Bacala. When was that?
Well, I haven't been to Bacala, but I've been to Tulum and the pyramids, and in that region. Yeah.
Now, Alex Ling is in the. Oh, forgive me. Before Alex, Jane Evershed, darling, good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to be here, Sacha. Blown away by that presentation.
Thank you, darling. Did you sit through the whole thing?
I did, and I just woo.
Well, thank you. Very, very kind. And Dr. Alex Ling.
Hi, Sacha. Yes. Hi, everybody.
Good. Well, that's us. It's a full house. Friends, today we are about to deconstruct. You see, this is where we should be having the slide of Solomon thrown up. Where is it? There we go. King Solomon, deconstructing the myth. Now, I have to say, this is something uniquely interesting as far as I'm concerned. I was really wanting to have this group of noble fellows on this panel because Dr. Alex Ling completely demolished my understanding of King Solomon earlier this year on tour when we were in Glastonbury. And he got on stage before I did his presentation, and absolutely deconstructed the myth that I had built in my mind, or my mind's eye, about King Solomon. Mm. And I think it's a very important subject. And I know I'm right. And I know that we're always at the tip of the spear and, really leaning around the curve. As we depart patriarchy, this galactic patriarchy, as we depart the fallen light of Atlantis, as we pierce the veil of the new earth, and as we invoke the spirit of the Magdalene and the true Christos, the true crossing of the lateral and the vertical, and become greater than we are, we surely have to reckon with these mammoth, epic archetypes, which are fixed totems in the main and symbols that anchor us into a given contextual framework. And in this particular case, you're looking at a slightly derelict shock poet, frontline activist, whatever. And I'm fatherless. I mean, I was born fatherless, in as much as I never had a father there. And for me to build up in my own mind's eye the need for a stalwart figure there, someone impenetrable, someone who was, could do no wrong. I lean into King Solomon, who I did as a child. I thought, well, there he is. There's a fine fettle of a man back in the annals of history. That's a man I could, learn from. And maybe that's true. Maybe I can learn from King Solomon. But the business of Solomon, Solomon's temple, the whole Masonic thing that's issued from that, now the reconstruction of the Temple of Solomon by the veritable House of Rothschild, that Sabbatean salamander, clutch of draconian, no bloodlines, who are now rebuilding the Temple of Solomon, Israel, and the whole godless orchestra of wickedness that issues from that part of the world. Okay, so I'll leave my preamble at that, except to say that that's the backdrop in my mind of how calamitous this is, to learn that King Solomon is not who we think he was necessarily. And yet, maybe he's perfectly situated on the duende line, the indivisible line between good and evil. And maybe that's the point. Let's discover it. I'm going to invite, very briefly, let me first read my production notes in just as a courtesy to Christy, who I think wrote a beautiful front here. King Solomon holds a revered place in human history as a paragon of wisdom, justice, and divine favor. Traditionally regarded as the author of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, his name is synonymous with sage counsel and sound judgment. Legends abound regarding his magnificent reign, his unparalleled wealth, and his fabled temple. And yet, recent interpretations challenge this idealized view. Emerging perspectives invite us, this is Christy being polite, I'm not that polite. Emerging perspectives invite us to reconsider Solomon's legacy. How about we blow the fucking thing up, particularly his innovations with water systems and alleged association with occult practices. Rather than being solely a benevolent and wise ruler, could King Solomon's choices and methods have had more lasting consequences, both in elevating and potentially diminishing human consciousness and sovereignty? These questions paved the way for a fresh dialogue about one of history's most enigmatic figures, and I have a series of questions I'm going to be asking this esteemed panel. But I do want to firstly invite the man responsible for demolishing my reverence for King Solomon. What is your 3-minute or 4-minute takeaway on King Solomon, Dr. Alex Ling?
So first of all, sorry that I did that and have kind of diminished this beautiful view you had from King Solomon. But I came across, the first time I came across was when I was studying actually the area of Levant or Levante, which is an area between Israel and Turkey. And so I came across the mount, which is Mount Megiddo, which translated means Armageddon. So this is a translation which is internationally is just one translation into Armageddon. So which is was for me like the starting point. I was really interested also in the spring which is inside the mount. So there are 27 different civilizations who have built up, destroyed. But in the center of it all is a spring. I won't go into all the details, but this spring has been sealed off for many, many years because it contains a way of practice which has manipulated the water. And this water was manipulated by King Solomon, possibly already by the Canaanites, but we don't know that. The only written records which are found were connected to King Solomon, who also ordered all his people not to drink from living water anymore. So this order was actually given out to people and it was a law. So I just didn't understand why he also was very much into sacrifices. So the sacrifices would be literally the blood was being mixed with the water of the spring, so then let into the cisterns, and then people would consume it. So that's something which I didn't thought sounded too positive, really. And so that from that point, I was studying all the in and outs of his career, of his existence. And of course, he was also a magician. We shouldn't forget that. They are the keys of Solomon, and they are the sigils. And there are 72 sigils officially known, but there is actually a much larger number. And the Templars have actually taken out the sigils around the world and have introduced them to very powerful places which are always connected to water. Plus, he has, of course, the blueprint of his temples, who are very much known also in the UK. So where we have the Freemason temple, which is literally almost like a copy of the temple of King Solomon. So that was briefly my introduction into learning that King Solomon is not specifically the good guy here, but he maybe have started off as a man of honor and had the right ideas, but I think he kind of definitely slipped a little bit, as so many people who go down that path, into maybe too much the right path of magic.
Fascinating. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I'm going to invite you, Jane. I want your threepence worth on King Solomon, if you will.
Well, my point of view is he definitely wasn't a good guy. I think he was a stalwart of the original invaders of Earth, a hierarchical, patriarchal human hybrid of the fallen angels, in a nutshell. I think he was a false hero of the Old Testament, which is rife with sanctioning rape and murder and throwing babies up against walls and all of that stuff. And I think even though he wrote Ecclesiastics and the Song of Solomon and all these Bible paragraphs, I think that, the Bible was changed, and they would have changed it in the 1500s, Francis Bacon, to make Solomon look much better than he probably was. And the biggest thing about him that I discovered was, obviously, he was a descendant of Abraham. Specifically, Solomon was the grandson of King David. And so he himself was a direct descendant of Abraham. And it was the site that he built his temple on was chosen. It was called Mount Moriah. And that is where Abraham had offered his son Isaac as a sacrifice. So it was a pretty shady place to build the temple in the first place. And I think that tells you all you really need to know. They were part of the invading death cult fallen angel hybrids who worshipped Moloch. And in return, Moloch rewarded them. And so in this case, Solomon's gold came from a long line of Moloch worshippers. And he also worked with demons and spirits to build his temple.
There you go. Love it. Thank you. My God, you took a stick to that poor man, Jane. Okay. I have a feeling, it's an uncanny feeling, that Dave Emery is going to kind of go into kind of sync with much of what you've said, and I can't wait to hear what his tie-up is. But I'm going to invite David Sereda in here. David, King Solomon.
Well, I have a lot to say here, so I don't know if I'm gonna. It's really complex. Wherever you see the light, you'll see the dark in the duality always right on top. In fact, in the book of John, chapter 8, Jesus is telling a large group of Jews that the God they're worshiping is a murderer and a liar. And I don't know why most Christians don't understand the real meaning of that story, but it is iconoclastic, because Jesus is basically saying that your God that you're worshiping is the wrong God, isn't the real God. But at the same time, Solomon's temple actually comes from the original tabernacle of Moses, which was an original Holy of Holies, was a tent that was 10 by 10 by 10 biblical cubits. And the measurement really, really matters. And extending beyond Moses's Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, very important, and the staffs, was a rectangular tent called the Holy Place, which was 10 by 20 cubits. So at the time of Solomon, all those measurements double. They double. And when I did a study on the actual measurements using the correct cubit, this will be my abstract, that measurement is a portal to the star Sirius B. And the math is perfect. I'll show you something quite shocking. We go to share screen here. Right here. Okay, so this measurement here, can you see this circle? circular stone structure. This is Chaco Canyon.
Hang on, I'm not seeing anything. Christy, where are you? I'm sorry, I momentarily went to the bathroom. I assumed that Christy would be there.
Okay, should I go to share?
Let me try and get this up for you, David. Stick it back there. I can't see your screen share.
Yeah, I just had it. I'll just say entire screen. Share entire screen. So,
there we go.
Share my screen. This, can you see this big stone circle? Yeah. Okay, yeah. That is in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. It is a Native American preemptive, beautiful city. And this circle, I went around with a Leica laser, and I measured this to be a perfect Solomonic Holy of Holies measurement. On a Leica laser, it's exactly 34 feet. And that is no coincidence. That cannot be a coincidence. So what happens is that's 20 royal cubits, which is the measurement of the Holy of Holies in Solomon's temple. Now, this is where it gets really complex, because at the time of Moses, it was 10 cubits. And if you do the math and you use the right cubit, it's going to take you all the way to the star Sirius B to 97% accuracy to the diameter using musical octaves to that star. Now, if we go to the period where everything goes wrong, because the Solomonic, the Holy of Holies as a temple, is the place where the Shekinah, the feminine spirit of God, actually lived as a sphere of light that was so bright that if you entered the temple and you weren't prepared, you would be physically permanently blinded, actually. And so what happens is, I want to show you this. It's really quite amazing, because Leonard Nimoy,
Mr. Spock, to you,
Spock, who created a beautiful book on the Holy of Holies called Shekinah, is really very, very well abreast to the meanings. Here it is, right here. Okay, let me just show you this, because I'm going to show you the point where everything goes wrong in Solomon's temple, as opposed to the period where things were working quite well.
You know, David, you are destroying my flow here. I was getting your introductory comments and then going to ask you to do the.
Okay, all right. I'll save the best for last. But so there's a point in the abstract where everything goes wrong in Solomon's temple.
Okay, there. You see, that's the piece, isn't it? Left fork in the road. David, you've got the floor, sir.
What can I say after those three wonderful exclamations? I thought it was great. Alex, I appreciate what you said about Megiddo, meaning Armageddon. Armageddon is originally planned to be about now, between 2000 and 2022. So that is relevant. Also, everything that you told me there about Solomon's temple, there was some great information there. Thank you. Jane, why am I not surprised at what you said there about Solomon? I loved it. Thank you very much. And I endorse so much of what you say anyway. And David, you pointed out something very significant. You pointed out something which I think we need to be aware of, and that is light and dark, good and evil, that everything here is duality. So we're looking at Solomon. I can understand why Sacha originally thought that Solomon was such a great guy, such a great example of a man. And that's the good side. But in duality, there is always the other. I mean, for example, Deuteronomy actually says that Solomon actually did many things that he shouldn't have done. He got Egyptian horses, and he was never supposed to go back to Egypt to get anything. He took many wives. He was only supposed to have one. He was not supposed to store up lots of gold, and he had 666 talents of it. So Solomon, even in his own fraternity, his own contemporary times, was not regarded as the be-all and end-all. So let me look at elsewhere then, if I may. The Islamists revere that's the Islamists, obviously, of the other Abrahamic religion. They revere Solomon as a prophet and as a magician, as Alex said. And he has been regarded as an exorcist also. So he covers all the bases, you know, the good and the bad, as David Sereda was suggesting. In fact, there's many things about Solomon that we need to be aware of. And as Jane pointed out, he's actually a human hybrid connected to a fallen angelic race line who manipulated our history for millions of years, and particularly for the last 15,000, and have been deliberately affecting our ability to heal and to be immune from all sorts of things. So it connects right in with Alex's wonderful work with water, because those fallen angelics wished to actually demolish humanity, and if they couldn't demolish it, then to take hold of all of the wonderful celestial powers that humanity has. And Solomon was instrumental in this. You see, Solomon was the Jehovian version of a great king. And one of the things that happened was that angelic grail-lined humans, their kings and queens, the kings would be slaughtered by the Anunnaki human hybrids. That's Solomon and David. David killed the Goliath, the giant Goliath, and Goliath was a good guy. David was not the good guy in this particular instance. And Solomon was told by the Galactic Federation to slaughter the whole of the Hebrew nation. That's tribe 2 of the angelic humans. He was informed that he had to slaughter them. And so he set out to do exactly that. Unfortunately, there was a blowback. And the blowback was that in endeavoring to slaughter the Hebrew nation, this is something you will never read of in Bibles or in any Rothschild document, in endeavoring to slaughter the Hebrew nation, which had been tried to be done before by Moses, the fake Moses. Unfortunately, there was a radionic plasma beam blowback from the Galactic Federation beam ships, and that is what destroyed Solomon's temple. And it had to be rebuilt, of course, later. And then the Romans took it to pieces in 70 AD. So really what we're looking at here, my version of all of this, is that Solomon was in many ways a good guy through his mother, angelic Grail Queen, human mother. And he was not such a good guy through the influences of his father, who was an Anunnaki human hybrid, operating according to the Jehovian Yahweh Anunnaki Templar operation. So those are the things really behind it. And if you ever wanted some inspiration about how Solomon had a magical and in fact almost an evil aspect to him, you only have to look at his connection with Saturn, which is not a great place to be as an angelic human. Saturn, because that is where he gets his Solomon Square, his Song of Solomon, etc., etc. The inspiration for all of that came from Saturn. So I think that everybody has said something significant about Solomon and has revealed him to be a man who is affected by duality, good and evil.
Fantastic, fantastic. And so, yes, you did qualify that deeper instinct that I expressed in my preamble, that Solomon is the ultimate archetype of temporal power. You know, he's neither good nor evil. He's a perfect confluence at the genetic galactic genome level of being a perfect synthesis. And in a sense, he becomes whatever we want him to become. I'm going to get back to David's greater explanative, which I'm really looking forward to. But I do want to bring Dr. Ling back in quickly, because it was you, Alex, as I mentioned, who told me that Solomon was taking water, putting it into cisterns and pipes, destructuring water, killing the quantum connectivity of water, and feeding that to the populace. And that was, in a sense, the implementation of a technology that downgraded our innate divinity as angelic humans. So King Solomon is noted as the first ruler to implement large-scale cisterns and water pipes, engineering a system that may have destructurized well, I wouldn't say may have. There's no may have destructurizing. It did destructurize natural water's vitality. So speak a bit about this innovation on Solomon's part. And that clearly was of tremendous detriment to spiritual and ecological balance. How could he have done any differently at that time in trying to civilize the hordes of the Levant or wherever the fuck he grew up? I don't know where he was, but how could he have done otherwise other than sequestering water into cisterns and pipes? Was that happenstance or was it deliberate?
I definitely think that this was used for his own advantage, because if you have a population who's very switched on spiritually, and you have a leader who is very ego-driven and only interested in his own powers, and that was surely the case. He was a warmongering person who was literally just interested in getting more power. He also was, of course, conducting a whole legion of demons. So that was also something which people don't necessarily associate with him. There are the 72 lesser keys of Solomon, which are all connected to entities. And if you know a little bit about magic, then you know for sure that this is not very positive work. So this is definitely something which came to me also in the first few months when I, years back, was studying his work. And so coming back to the water, yes, the easiest way to manipulate water is to use frequencies. And if you have water, because water is like a child, you can put anything into water. It doesn't know if it is good or if it is bad. So you can program water with frequencies. And if you have sacrificial frequencies going into the water, then this has really a profound effect on us humans when we consume that water. It's not just about the blood, it is about the whole signature, how the blood actually, who would belong to, and what the moments of death as well, which are memorized in the blood and then going into the water. So we have the fear and the brutality of that moment of the death of these people who have been sacrificed. So, and that fear is, as we know, the number one tool to control us, and through fear, and it's still going on today. So that was like the origin, really, in my opinion, where this method has been used by King Solomon to control his people.
Fascinating. Okay, beautiful. David, riff off that and take us into your piece. Thank you.
Okay, so first, I'll show you kind of a synopsis where things go really dark at Solomon's temple. I mean, I'm going to go backwards in time, because when Jesus is crucified during the 3 hours of darkness, which is the moment when this mysterious planetary body eclipses the sun, which is in my model, a lightning bolt strikes the temple, breaks the stone top, tears the tent, which is made of linen this thick, surrounding the Ark of the Covenant, which is no longer there. It's not actually there, because this is Second Temple. When Jesus is alive, it's Solomon's Second Temple. So the Ark of the Covenant has been removed. The staffs are not there, and so at the moment of his crucifixion, the pillars holding it up are knocked over, and then the fabric is torn top to bottom around the Holy of Holies, where the Ark used to be, which cannot be there in Second Temple. So that's very key. Now, when you go backwards in time, actually a little bit forward in time, James, the brother of Jesus, who was the first leader of the first Christian church, he's his physical brother, was taken to the top of the temple and thrown off and killed. So there is a sacrifice of the bloodline of Jesus on the temple without knowing how to get up there. You have to understand, I mean, this is over 50 feet in the air at the top of the platform. It's 30 cubits, and a biblical cubit is a cubit and a handbreadth. So he's way up there. Nobody knows how he gets up there. Now, if you go to Matthew, Jesus is tempted by Satan at the temple, and somehow Satan takes him and puts him on the top of the temple, and nobody can explain how they got Jesus up there. There's no stairs. It's sheer. So we see Satan's activity twice in Solomon's temple, and Satan's telling Jesus to throw himself off, just like later his brother James would be thrown off. Now I'm going to go further back, which is Second Temple, and that is when King Herod of Judea, who is known for his architectural achievements in the reconstruction of the Jerusalem Temple, Solomon's Temple complex, after Temple 1 was destroyed around the 6th century before Christ. And he's the one who orders the persecution of the children, of the innocents, because Jesus is born. So it's showing you where the Jewish kings got really dark from this period that is following Solomon. So there's all this dark energy manifesting around the temple because King Herod of Judea is ordering to kill all the children because Jesus was born. He's really representative of the dark forces in that moment. But if you go further back, you're going to find, again, this is the way it's always been throughout history. Wherever the light manifests, the dark comes right on top and tries to claim the territory. And then the public eye sees the darkness thinking the whole thing is bad, but actually the dark forces are so jealous they try to take that and corrupt it. So when you see these manifestations, killing children, trying to kill Jesus, throwing James from the top of the temple and killing him, you see what is the energy that's causing that, because they're trying to take the Stargate, which is really the Stargate of Sirius B. And I have the math that proves that. I'm not going to demonstrate the math today because I don't think people really like math. But I'm going to show you Leonard Nimoy's Spock. I met him actually, and actually got a copy of his signed book.
You met Spock?
Oh, I've met him many times.
Good God, man.
Okay, so can you see my screen? Leonard Nimoy, Shekinah? I just need to know you're seeing this. Okay, so his book demonstrates photographically the ritual of women representing the Shekinah, because the Shekinah is a feminine, the goddess spirit that manifests itself in the original Holy of Holies at the time of Moses. And he does these beautiful semi-nude photographs of the women going into the temple and wearing their veil and being illuminated by this sphere of light that was feminine and lived inside of the temple. It's a beautiful book. It's very, very, he has such an incredible story, the way he describes it in the book. A lot of people don't know about this part of Leonard Nimoy and his obsession with the Holy of Holies and the feminine aspect of God. So in the original book of Matthew, which the Romans bastardized, Jesus refers to the spirit as his mother, as feminine. And again, if you can really draw a clear connection, because the measurements of the Holy of Holies at the time of Moses, 10 by 10 cubits, is the measurement of the Queen's Chamber in the Great Pyramid exactly. The measurement of the King's Chamber, 10 by 20 cubits, is the same measurement as Moses' holy place. Now, if I take those measurements of the Queen's Chamber as the original Holy of Holies, identical to Moses' tabernacle, and I multiply by a musical octave by 2 by 2 by 2 by 2, 20 times, I'll come to the diameter of Sirius B, accurate to almost 98%. That's phenomenal.
Wow.
So
that is remarkable.
That means its intention in the beginning was a temple to Isis. If you can make that connection, so that the goddess, because Shekinah is feminine, that Moses' tent and the Ark of the Covenant were tuned to, was Sirius and Isis. Now, when you come forward by removing the Ark of the Covenant, removing the staff, the Solomon's Temple doubling the measurement, which I can't see where those instructions came from, but it's still a musical octave. So by changing the dimension shouldn't have mattered. And notice the Chaco Canyon Circle in New Mexico is 20 royal cubits. That's a Solomonic.
Very good.
So something goes wrong at a certain point and it becomes dark, very dark, as I demonstrated.
Beautiful. Jane, David Sereda, madman in a beanie or genius archaeohistorian?
That's not fair, Sacha. I don't do well with measurements.
Okay, no, but I mean, all fascinating stuff. And what David's doing is really going into some of it's kind of convergence of myth and science. Alex, I saw you paying close attention to what David was saying. Do you have any comments before I pass the stick on to Dave Emery?
Yes, I'm definitely very much familiar with all these calculations, and also I've researched the temple. But one aspect which we haven't actually mentioned yet, which I would like to say just very quickly, is that there is still a huge following of the magic of King Solomon. So it's not something which has been forgotten over the last centuries, but these sigils are still very much active, and people do follow them, especially the occult scene, which has been kind of bumped up in the 80s, for example, and so the Goetia, which is a book which describes all the sigils and its praxis in detail, has been circulating ever since. So, and I think that there is a lot more to it than we can see. So it's a very kind of underground movement where King Solomon magic is still quite active in those days even. So, but yes, also all the buildings which are connected to the blueprints and so on. But my father, for example, was also someone who was very much in practicing these kind of ritualistic ways, because they have been handed down from the Templars and the Illuminatis and the Masons, of course, continuing to give the knowledge how these people, including my father, could access these gateways and how they could enter the world of these specific demons. So we can just say today, oh, well, this was all rubbish. But, the truth of the matter is that this kind of praxis has been used and is still used today with very powerful people who are holding still some very important strengths.
And what's the commonality there? That again, King Solomon, the great architect, all that becomes an externalized symbol of our own divinity, in a sense. What is your takeaway? I mean, your father was a Grand Master of the largest Masonic lodge in Germany. You're a very long dynasty of Chinese and Germanian peoples, but very deeply steeped in the Masonic traditions at the highest level. As Lazarus members know, your father was famously murdered by the Masons because of the good work he was trying to do at the end of his life in unearthing the nastiest aspects connected to off-world technologies and so on that those Masonic lodges are involved in. So you've got a uniquely enigmatic connection to the story. But what is your personal takeaway of the connection between King Solomon, the great patriarch, this arbiter of jurisprudence, and the connection to the great architect of the Masonic traditions? And is this? I think what I'm asking is something along this line. The last 14,000 years, the galactic underpass since the Great Deluge, more or less, a semi-arc of the grand procession of the equinox ago. It's clear we've been in a galactic sleep. We're emerging through that galactic sleep, breaking into the age of Aquarius and into the revelation and the onset of biological ascension. Those are my words.
That's right.
But do you think that Solomon, who came in more or less 3,000 years ago, so almost like a quarter of the way behind us on that galactic sleep, do you think he was a compression of all of the patriarchal constructs of the ancient days, the Atlantean era, so to speak, almost compressing epigenetically into Solomon, salt man, man of salt, gold, ore, so, yeah, all of that, sun, Ra. Do you think that he simply was the embodiment of that compression of ages, and that actually he was the onset of the end of patriarchy resultantly, if you follow what I'm saying?
Yes. I think that's a very good point, because he was from the old world, and he also had enormous knowledge which came from the other countries as well. So that's where the whole knowledge of magic originated, because he was not, of course, the founder of these kind of that particular praxis. So that was a praxis which he had or has taken on from the Arabic worlds, from very known magicians which were around in that time. So, and he then manipulated, sadly, some of the work for his own progress and for his own powers. So yes, but coming back to your question, I think he was really at that cusp where the old ancient knowledge, and before we got manipulated,
Yeah.
he had definitely access to that. And I think that's what I said in the beginning. I think maybe his first idea, or his first intention, let's say, was maybe not a bad intention, but I think it got sidetracked, and he, as so many magicians, they suddenly can feel the power and which they have because of all the praxis. It's not just like a quick fix, right? So you study it for many years, and then you have also gifts, which we all have as humans, but they have used their gifts to enter different dimensions and to have conversations with these entities. So, and they gain power. But if it is for their own personal crusade, let's say, then there's a very hefty price to pay. And that's why even people like Aleister Crowley lost out in the last days of his life. He got literally, signed up by his own demon who he created. So, yeah. And there are so many elements in it which are so important. But yes, coming back to what you said, I'm sure that he had all that knowledge which was compressed in that specific time, which originated from the water as well. And that's why he knew how important it is to manipulate the water so that he could fulfill the vision he had of controlling humans, for sure.
Yeah. Jane, before I swing on to Dave Emery, who can you think of any greater patriarchal totem or archetype than Solomon, or off your bat, as you're batting on behalf of all things Magdalene and feminine here?
Sacha, I think here I'd just love to get my 2 cents in as far as patriarchy goes, and the connection with water, if you don't mind, because I'd have to rack my brains to think who the worst bloody patriarch on earth ever has been. But when we think of water, unborn water especially comes from the womb of the Mother Earth, and the circulatory system of the earth is feminine frequency. And so, in my mind, when we defile this earth, when we throw out hemp and we bring in petroleum, whatever this hierarchical system under patriarchy does, it always fouls the water up, because it is the feminine. It represents the feminine frequency, and it stands in the way of unity consciousness, as Alex was so eloquently saying earlier on in the program before, about how water is one single body, and it has the power to create unity consciousness among all of us as as the angelic human species. And it reminds me too of these movies you see with the blob. That's their greatest enemy, this blob of water that's going to come and just take over everything. That's their blob. And it's our water. And so it is everything. And it is the feminine frequency. So I hope you don't mind me throwing that in there.
I love that. Thank you.
Say it.
Thank you. Dave, the omnipotence of blobs? You've got
You always give me the worst questions. I can't talk about blobs, but what I'd like to do is, I'd like to, if I can, try to bring everybody's wonderful points that you've all made together as one, because really that is what our whole experience is now. Our contemporary times are to make sense of everything that has gone before, so that we can understand the identity of who we are now. And that would include our Earth too, all together as one in unity. And so I'm trying to bring everything together. So when I consider what David's mathematics entails, and it was brilliant, as David's mathematics are always brilliant. He's right in bringing all of this together to consider the whole of the dimensional experience, because, you know, introducing Sirius B, which is such an important planet for us all, and especially in our history. And so all of these numbers and these mathematics, they all count. And there have been a duality in both of this. And that's what Alex was referring to as well. There is good magic, if you like to say, good mathematics, and there is bad mathematics, bad magic. And of course, we know that that has been both operating at the same time. Similarly, let me also say that all Alex's work and his information there about the water in King Solomon's temple is absolutely pivotal here. Because as Jane has just said too, the importance of water. Now, water is obviously, as Alex knows, and we all know now, that water is so critical, and it's connected with plasma, and it's connected with ectoplasma, and it's connected with the firmament, and it's connected with the whole of our universe. So it is absolutely pivotal. And the connection with angelic humanity is, of course, equally pivotal. We know that now. And also is very important is the mathematics of our own energy systems, our own electromagnetism as angelic humans. So I'm trying to put all the strands of this astonishing tapestry together, and it is connected with Solomon, because you see, Solomon was a conflicted guy, like so many angelic humans have been. He was born to an angelic mother who taught him the essential elements of the cosmos, the divine principle. But he was the son of an Anunnaki who was totally ingrained with the false magic, the false light, and the reversed. And so he was a conflicted guy who 1 minute would be wise and sensible and calm and an example to the world, and the next minute he would fall under the bus, as it were, of his own elemental desires. And he has not been alone in this. So what is the connection between what he did with the water in Solomon's temple and the connection with us here today? Well, it's very simple. I told you earlier that Solomon was instructed, he was psychically bond possessed by the fallen angelics behind the fourth dimensional veil, and he was instructed to eliminate the Hebrew nation. He couldn't go out there with swords, etc., and slaughter them all. That was just too impossible. So he was instructed to destroy the water which connected the angelic humans with their soul position on earth and in the universe. Because by doing that, by destroying the water connection, he would also destroy the electromagnetic mathematics which helped angelic humans to be guardians and protectors and healers of our earth. And this is a very important point to remember. Solomon was a conflicted guy. He was in a great position of privilege. He could have done a great deal for the whole of humanity and the Hebrew nation, but he chose not to. And perhaps we may not be able to blame him entirely, because he was psychically possessed by a much greater power, which followed the fallen magic and the alternative reversed mathematics, which David has so clearly and eloquently explained. So I think what we're looking at here, and trying to tie everything together, is Solomon is a pivotal figure in our history, in our biblical history anyway. But he is yet another example of a conflicted guy who had enormous power as a patriarch, and who, unfortunately, although we don't know all the details, or haven't until now, we have to come to the conclusion that he was yet just another patriarch of a human hybrid type who had been deliberately pushed into an aggression towards angelic humans and towards the earth. And our history is full of all of people like that.
Indeed. And you know what I love about what you just said? I mean, for me, it almost is a parallel to Ignatius Loyola. Because, you know, for me, Jesuitical device is really the apparatus and the delivery mechanism of evil, if we in the temporal sense, in the last 500 years or last couple of hundred years. No question about that. When we go back to the treaties and how the Jesuits became the confessor priests and stole into the bedchambers of the kings and queens and learned all the secrets, and then sent them all back to the superior general, whatever they called him in Rome. All roads lead to Rome. That's where it comes from, and the black papacy, the Jesuit thing. Ignatius Loyola, a similar kind of archetypal character, which on the one hand we're given to believe historically is this very humble, modest creature, almost like a Franciscan monk, like St. Francis. And yet, we also know when we dig into it that Ignatius Loyola, having played that archetypal role of being this incredible monkish, reverential being, spiritualized being, did stop his caravan on the road that one fine day and tell his followers, stay here, don't follow me, I'll be back. He was having some kind of turn. And he left the caravan and moved into the forest to a meadow on the other side of the forest. He came back some hours later, a completely changed being. Something had happened. Did he meet with the devil in that meadow? Was he demonically possessed at that moment and then came back, rejoined the caravan? And that was the moment at which he understood his mission, which was to weaponize everything connected to the true essence of the Cathars and the Essenes, and to fully weaponize the Christic and Christian message and turn it into the Society of Jesus, into the heinous assault against spirituality that the Jesuitical tradition then became. So in a sense, what you said about Solomon being demonically possessed, at a point at which he could have taken the right fork in the road and been this extraordinary emperor to the Golden Age. Similarly with the story of Ignatius Loyola, David Sereda, Ignatius Loyola, King Solomon, the temple, mathematics, qubits, all the stuff that you understand. What good stuff comes through the legacy of Solomon by your learning?
Well, first of all, I mean, it seems phenomenal to me why, as humans, we get so attracted to wherever there's the money and power center. His treasure was worth countless billions today. He had 700 wives, by the way, 700 wives. And he didn't have sex with all of them. God, he'd be like lying on the side of the road with his tongue hanging out if he even got to a quarter of them. But it shows you the greed, right, of having such an enormous amount of wives. So that's got to make you a little suspicious right there. But again, I think the original Holy of Holies and the holy place being identical to the measurements of the King and Queen's chamber and the pyramid draws a connection, because the pyramid's connection to Sirius, which is what beckoned me to do the mathematics of taking with the correct royal cubit, and the original Holy of Holies was 10 royal cubits and Solomon was 20. It wouldn't make any difference. I keep multiplying that by 2 20 times. Notice it's 20 cubits, 20 octaves, and I'm at the diameter of the circular size of Sirius B. By the way, Sirius B is very small. It's almost comparative to the planets. Venus is the closest match in diameter to Sirius B. Which is very interesting, because that means there's a Venus Sirius B connection. So to say that all of the stars in the Milky Way galaxy, each star has a vibration and has a logos. And the ancient Greeks called the logos, the solar logos, was really God. In fact, in John 1, in English, it's the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. But in Greek, which is the language it was written in, is in the beginning was the logos, and the logos is with God, and the logos is God. So our son's logos is the local God in John 1 in the original Greek. So that would mean Sirius, B, and A have their own logos, their own vibration. So every star then, of course, animates the water, as I demonstrated last time when we took the sound of our sun recorded by NASA and we restructured, tap water, which was chaotic, and brought it back to beauty and form. So the stars themselves are the true definition of logos, which is really the hyperdimensional aspect of our sun. It's not the physical sun, it's the vibrational aspect, is the true definition of God in John 1, which is Jesus speaking. So Jesus is speaking in a stellar language. And of course, stars are hydrogen and helium. And so water is hydrogen. So which is where we get all our energy from. So it does come back to water. Now, there's another really interesting scene in the Exodus where in the Holy of Holies, which again is original, there's a scene where a cloud actually comes out and surrounds the temple, right? And of course, what makes a cloud? Alex knows this: water. Water and heat generates a cloud. And it's the same when you have the appearance of Moses as God on the Sinai. Now there's also a point where prophets are confused by the voices they're hearing. When Abraham hears a voice to sacrifice his own son on the altar, that's the hardest part for a psychic experience, is to know where's the voice coming from that I'm hearing? How do I know it's coming from the good, source of the light? How do I know I'm not being tricked? Because we know Jesus himself gets tricked in Matthew after his 40-day fast, and he's weakened, and he's taken to the top of the temple and told to jump by Satan. And then again, Satan takes him to the top of an exceeding high mountain and tells him to fall down and throw himself off the mountain. So we can show examples where the prophets can hear the wrong voice. And that could be where Solomon was led astray. I mean, he goes for money and wealth, 700 wives. And so he's going into this consciousness of greed. And the consciousness of greed manifests enormous money and makes things big. And then people go into things that are big thinking they're very important, right? So if I told you that God lived in a little muddy hut on the side of a hill, how many people today would go? Probably nobody. They wouldn't believe there's anything important going on there because there's no money. So it's kind of the way we got programmed. Solomon is following the program of deception, which is enormous money and power. But that doesn't mean that money is bad. It just means it can lead to a temptation to use that the wrong way, that power the wrong way. And that's probably what happens to Solomon. But I think that the real gem is the original Holy of Holies, is a stargate. And if there was a stargate operating on the earth properly, the dark forces would fight to steal it. Yes, they would. It would be more valuable than anything to get your hands on that stargate.
Very good.
So there's a war that goes on.
Very good. Thank you, David. That's beautiful. Okay, friends, we are coming to the end of this panel, and then I'm going to show a short clip and speak a little bit further with Dr. Ling about the Guardians of the Water campaign. But before we do, as we wind up this Solomon section, I've learned a hell of a lot from it. Lessons for the present and the future, and also by way of your closing comments on what we've been discussing here today on this panel. What lessons, if any, can contemporary society learn from reassessing the ambiguous, to say the least, legacy of King Solomon, and how might those lessons influence leadership and moral responsibility in the modern world? That's the question. To me, it's a question that really speaks to idolatry, and how do we review our relationship individually, politically, in terms of entertainment, celebrity, media, political figures. Idolatry is really the issue we're talking about here. But what lessons, if any, can contemporary society learn from reassessing ambiguous legacy, the legacy of King Solomon? That's essentially the piece. Jane, let me invite you in your closing comments. You'll need to unmute your mic because someone was shuffling. I didn't know who it was, but I had to mute all your mics. Yeah.
Well, I think the most interesting part we've got 1 million patriarchs running around all through history, destroying and ruining and creating wars everywhere. So I like to think of Solomon as just one of the examples. But the most interesting part of this entire conversation was the link to the water. And the fact that Solomon was working with the demonics and the fallen angels means that he couldn't work with the ultimate supreme Trinity. And I wonder if Christy's got that slide right now, but maybe she has, maybe not. But if you look at the water molecule, it is a trinity, the oxygen and the 2 hydrogens. That is the ultimate blueprint, and it models itself exactly after the supreme trinity that I won't go into the details of right now, of the balance between the masculine and the feminine and the connection to pure consciousness. And water itself in its structure is pure consciousness, especially when it's unborn. And I just wish I'd had time to ask Alex today why water doesn't go into DNA. I know I can't do that, but that's what my 2 cents is at the end of this model. If we're going into the future and we want to influence, we need to bring the balance back and go to the original trinity of harmony and divinity that is responsible for creating all life in the universe, all matter, and all consciousness.
Thank you, Jane. Alex, why doesn't water go into DNA? Oh, you'll need to unmute, Alex. You all need to unmute.
Okay, so yes, there's a very simple explanation, actually. So if we're absorbing water, there's a whole process involved when the water is actually entering our body and going into every single cell in our body. But mainly what it needs to transform into plasma. So that is the point when it actually enters also our spinal cord and all these kind of things, where then can actually also have an alteration to our DNA. So, but it needs to be supercharged first. So that's why it is so important that we are consuming structured water, which is living water, which has the best possible platform really for these kind of supercharges to take place in our body. So if that is not something which we consume, and we consume water which has even fluorides and all sorts of other chemicals inside, so there is definitely a disconnection. So, and in the times of King Solomon, the frequency which he introduced was not harmonizing with our original frequencies. So we're not meant to be bombarded with this warmongering energies which is manipulating us. So we are all coming from peace. We are all coming from a beautiful source, which is actually really connected to the cosmic waters, which is the source of all creation. And on this planet, we still have access to these waters. But they also know that the best way of manipulating humans is, as we learned through King Solomon, is to manipulate the water. Very simple. And that is still what's happening today. I mean, just look at the whole campaign we had in the 60s and so on, you know, where people promoting toothpaste with fluorides and all these kind of things. I mean, it's just like an ongoing palette. And just look how many people here in Mexico are consuming Coca-Cola, which is really altering your DNA into a really massive situation. So, and there is so many things which have been introduced into water. Also the waterways, they have been changed. We have built dams. We have been kind of really manipulating water to its, you know, shook it to the core. And we still are able to connect the water in the most loving way. And now I think I've lost the connection.
No, it's very good. We can hear you. But it's interesting what you said about Coca-Cola. Dan Winter and I 10 years ago did a show where we were talking about the frequencies of Coca-Cola and Kentucky Fried Chicken and, you know, Wendy Burgers and McDonald's and, you know, that kind of shit, high street food. And the frequency sets of things like Coca-Cola, certainly in the modern context, not the early iterations of Coca-Cola, which were quite different, but what they became, those frequency sets are very geared into methane breathing Draco reptilians. I mean, it's a frequency attunement. And of course, it's also about turning those foods, and those big brands have been bioengineered in order to also key our genetics back into the draconian reptilian zeta reticulan, you know, type of genomic expression. We know that's what the battle of the high street has been all about, you know. In any event, fascinating subject. Dave Emery, closing a couple of minutes, then I want to pass the mic to Dave Sereda for a couple of minutes as well, and then we're moving on to close this section. Dave, unmute your mic. No, you are unmuted. Forgive me. Just speak.
Okay. All right. Okay. Up on my screen has come the I am, the cross in the matter of Saturn, which is also the square of Solomon. I simply mentioned that because that is an example of the electromagnetic magic and mathematics of the fallen reversed frequency aspect, as opposed to the cosmic divine design 12-based mathematics of life. I was going to talk about that, but I won't now, because what I'm going to talk about, just to close, is that about 20 million years ago, up till about 6 million years ago, the connection between Earth and the cosmos and angelic humanity, which is who we are, was very, very strong. And we knew all the cosmic divine principles. We knew them. So, for example, if we wished to heal somebody, we would place our hands on them or just above them, and it would affect the water base within them. We could even change the waters by putting our hands in it. In fact, angelic humans can still do that. You can put your hands in the water and you can change it. Now, how did this all change? Well, this all changed because of what we're talking about, the patriarchal effect of the last 15,000 years. And what is the platform base for this change? How we managed to shift our awareness of self away from who we truly are as cosmic divine design beings into something which would look upwards to someone like Solomon for the answers, or someone like government for the answers, or someone who's very wealthy for the answers, for help, when in fact in the past our original intention was always to be the help for ourselves, the help for our whole humanity. We have never had a need to look above ourselves to someone like Solomon for all of the answers and to extricate us from all the difficulties of our world. So basically what's happening now, through Alex's work, through David's work, through Jane's visual artwork, through all of these things, and through your work too, Sacha, what we are doing is we're changing our awareness of our own self, our identity. And this means that we no longer have to look up to Solomon. He was a conflicted guy. He had some good bits, he had some bad bits, but so what? We're moving on because we now know, through all of the things we have finally learned, who we are. And who we are the people who make the difference. We are the beings of the cosmic divine design who make the difference. And all we need is intent.
Very good. You've got the gig. I'm appointing you as our cardinal in the New Earth Diocese that we're announcing in the new year. You're going to be on the road as our evangelical cardinal. Thank you, Dave. That was beautiful. David Sereda, I would like to invite you to close this session, please. 2 or 3 minutes, David. But I'd love to know what your summation is. What do we take away culturally, collectively? What do we take away from the entirety of the legacy of King Solomon?
Well, first of all, I think we have to evolve into the idea of single leadership positions. I think we need a balance of male, female in leadership in geometric structures of what that leadership looks like. And I also think we need representation in the different age groups in life, in male, female, so that power is not in the hands of one person. So the whole idea of dictatorship and kingship is structured in that old myopic single mind way instead of the collective mind. I mean, the idea of democracy is supposed to be a collective, but it doesn't work very well the way we've designed it. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So I think our structures, what we have to learn is too much power in one person's hand, like Solomon, leads to corruption. And it seems to always do that for some reason. And yet we don't seem to evolve past that. And by the way, the rebuilding of Solomon's temple, they're using the wrong cubit. So with the wrong cubit, it's going to be the wrong frequency. And the whole thing's going to be a disaster because they don't know how to do math and they can't read. The math I do is actually really simple. If I showed it to you, in a workshop, showing you, the dimensions of the original Holy Holies to Series B. And by the way, Series A, this is the brightest star in the sky. The B star revolves around the A star just a tad less than 50 years, which is why there are 50 states in the United States. And in fact, Alaska and Hawaii were the last states to be added to, because the Olympic cycle of the Olympic Games oscillated between 49 months, one period, and 50 months, and then 49 months, and which comes out to be 4-point-something years, which is why the Olympics are, again, a representation of the orbit of Sirius A around Sirius B. So it's that 49 to 50 cycle. And of course, the elements in the geometry of Washington, D.C. and the Washington Monument we've gone over before. And again, the dark forces always come in. Wherever there's light, they just find their way in. They find their way in with money and power, and we let them do that. And that's why the Roman Catholic Church, all these great institutions become so dark, because somehow the money gets in there, and then it just destroys what initially was started. Like, even the last thing I'll say is all the greatest communities from Berkeley to Kitsilano in Vancouver, British Columbia, that the hippies started with all of their art. The rich people came in and said, hey, there's all these groovy restaurants and there's all these art galleries. Let's buy up all the real estate and ruin it and make it boring again. It's classic. So wherever you see structures forming on the earth like temples, we have to somehow keep the power of that structure in the hands of the many instead of giving it into the hands of one insane billionaire.
Very good. David, thank you so very much. David, Sereda, Dave, Emery, Jane Evershed, thank you. Love you guys, and beautiful session. Very edifying for me.